This is Coda Radio, episode 40, for March 11th, 2013. Hi everyone, you're listening to Coda Radio, Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly talk show, taking a pragmatic look at the art and business of software development and related technologies. This episode's brought to you by our two fantastic sponsors, GoDaddy.com. Use Coder295 to get a .com for $2.95. Ting.com. Visit coderadio.ting.com to get $25 off your first device. My name is Chris. Joining us every single week is our host, Mr. Michael Dominic. Hey there, Michael.
I'm sorry, Chris. That is now Michael Mario.
Hello, Michael Mario. Wait a minute. I thought it was Mario.
It is Mario. This is breaking news, Chris. Right off the Associated Press wire.
We kind of have, we don't normally have exclusive breaking news, but today, you, my friends, have joined.
We're in the Situation Room.
That's right, Michael. What is it we have from the front lines? Breaking news. You've brought it here to the show, and we've decided to turn Coda Radio into a news show from now on.
Mario of Super Mario Brothers fame. His mother must have hated him a lot to name him Mario.
Well, or she just wasn't very creative.
Well, Luigi's Luigi. Although Luigi was found in the street. That's true.
Wow. We're starting kind of weird these last few episodes.
Well, so this is another one of those special episodes you get every few weeks where I haven't slept.
You pulled an all-nighter.
Indeed. And it was not it was an HTML all-nighter.
Oh, you were on like an HTML5, kind of like a bender, maybe you might say?
It was, I think, let's see, I started at 8 a.m. and ended at 6 a.m. this morning.
So that's a tear, as you guys say on the East Coast. Yeah.
Yes, that is an HTML
tear.
Those JavaScript errors were flying, man. The CSS was just not compliant. It was it was out of control.
Whoa. Wow. So are you just going to crash after the episode? Is that what your plan is?
No, I have to do some more work, and I have a meeting at like 1:30 or something.
Good God, man. Well, this is what coffee is for.
I don't know how you hippies do it on the East Coast.
West Coast? You're on the East Coast.
That's right. That's exactly what I meant.
Yeah.
But here on the East Coast, we code till we bleed, all right?
Wow.
And then when we bleed, we just put some ice on that, baby.
Over here, we're pretty much legalizing pot everywhere, so we're all just kind of chilling on the couch these days.
You don't even know what the hell you're doing. You're sitting there, you're like, yeah, let's play some My Little Pony Flash games.
Right. Exactly.
Oh, this is going to be a great show.
So now next week, we decided we wanted to try something kind of new, but we need to give you guys a heads up about it now so that way we can get some participation. At which point we should be completely refreshed and ready to go next week. Totally fired up.
I refuse to sleep.
Oh,
but continue. Okay.
All right. Well, we might, or that might happen.
I'm going for 8 days of uptime.
We're going to go for what I like to call a train wreck viewing over here on Coda Radio. Now, next week, we want you guys to call in during the show, so join us live. Now, Coda Radio is live at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern over at jblive.tv, and if you join us next week during our live show, then you can call in and ask us your question. So, by the way, that's also 4 p.m. in London, 5 p.m. in Paris, and 3 a.m. in Sydney. Wow.
You're calling from Sydney. I'm impressed.
Yeah, that means you're hardcore. But we'd love to hear from you guys. So, and usually the way this works is we need a pretty good showing. So that means we're going to need some of you who've never joined us live before to show up to make this work. But we thought it'd be really fun to do a call-in episode. So we're giving you a week's heads up. So that way.
And I just want to be super clear. The episode will only be as long as the calls.
Right. So if you guys don't show up, it's your fault. No show.
And I get to sleep.
Now, we're going to talk, we got a good batch of feedback this week, but there's a rumor we might talk a little Xamarin too.
I can neither confirm nor deny this. I'll have to get my aide to send you a memo.
Okay. While he does that, you know what? I'll give him a little time because we have the feedback to get through, so he's got some time. But first, why don't we get to our first sponsor so we can jump right into it this week?
Let's jump into it.
That is Ting.com, my friends. Ting.com is a no BS mobile service. And I was just telling Mr. Dominic on the pre-show that today, arriving today, it might actually show up during the show, should be my new Note 2 that I've got from Ting.com. And I'll tell you why I have fallen in love with Ting. First of all, they have great rates. I set my plan just the way I want. I have enough data that I need. I don't need the text, so I've turned that off. I've got just the right amount of phone minutes. And what's great about Ting is if I go over, it's totally reasonable. They just charge me for what I use at a very reasonable rate. And if I go under, they'll actually credit me for the time I didn't use and apply that to my account. So I love the no overage penalties. I love the credits, but I also love the fact that it's contract free. And the $6 a month for a new line, that nice flat rate makes it super great for small business or for a family. There's also a real reasonable data plan where it has built-in tethering and hotspotting right in the data plan. I love that.
Good. Did I tell you, Chris, I got a text message yesterday. I actually went over my minutes on my company phone.
Uh-oh.
That's unfortunate.
Uh-oh. Now
if I was using Ting, I would not be a problem.
No, and now you're going to discover that it apparently most of the major telcos coat SMS in gold, and you're going to get the gold. You'll get the gold rated charge on those. And what's great is like if you ever get in a jam like that, no hold customer support from Ting. You just give them a call on 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. East Coast time. You get right to a person, and I really love that. They're also a big Android fans, and they have a fantastic dashboard to manage your account. You know how, let's be honest, we prefer to use a service that has a good interface, that makes sense, that's clean, and that isn't trying to hide anything from you, and that's what Ting.com is built. So if you go to coderradio.ting.com, using that URL, you'll get a $25 credit off your first device or contract. So I brought over my Evo 4G. They have a small range of devices that they're testing, bringing over your own device. I brought over my Evo 4G, so I just got a $25 credit on my account, and my monthly service is like $35 a month. So it almost paid for my entire first month worth of service. So go to coderradio.ting.com. Let them know that you appreciate supporting the show just by visiting that URL and take a look at their offerings. I think you'll be really impressed. They're a great sponsor for the show. And from everybody out there who's just an enthusiast that wants to try out devices and not get locked into contracts, to small business who has maybe a little team that they want to get a group of people on with some reasonable rates, Ting.com is the way to go. Family, business, whatever it is. Check them out. coderradio.ting.com. And thank you to Ting for supporting the show. All right, Mr. Dominic, why don't we jump into our feedback segment?
Let's do it. So a wonderful listener sent me just, one of the best audio clips I've heard in a while.
Now, not the other clip, but you mean this clip.
Curmudgeon.
I don't think that's me.
Curmudgeon.
I think that's you.
Curmudgeon.
That's you.
Curmudgeon.
That's you.
Business?
No.
Hello, everybody.
So was I on some sort of curmudgeon tear last week?
Yeah, I think I forgot what we were hating on, but we were.
I like getting these sound bites though.
Yes, please keep sending them in. I'm sure this episode will have a few good ones.
Who us? No, never. Can't be. Impossible.
We have some good news. Nathan PC, who often writes apps and writes in about them, has ported his Cherry Notes application that was, if you recall, Chris, on BB10 to Android. It's an Evernote client, so give it a look.
I wonder which one will get more sales. Oh, wait a minute. It ties in with Evernote?
It's an Evernote client, yeah.
No, really?
That's what it says. That's what
it's
for me on iOS.
Okay, all right. Well, that's really cool. It's definitely a very nice looking app, and it looks like
I downloaded the Android one. It's pretty slick.
I see it also ties in. So it looks like you can tie in with write notes to your Dropbox. But I don't know about Evernote. I don't know about
I'm sorry. Dropbox, Evernote. Yeah. You know what? Both of them have leaked all my information anyway.
That's true. Don't forget. They both have. So that's good. This looks great. It's 99 cents in the Android Play Store, and we'll have a link to that in the show notes. Congratulations, Nathan PC. Moving right along. I'd be curious to know if you wanted to send in what the story was for moving from
that would be
BB10
cool.
to Android, right? What was that like?
Interesting.
All right. Good job, Nathan PC. Everybody go check that out. Maybe I should grab that and maybe I'll make it an app pick on Lass.
Do it. MacArthur writes in, not to be confused with Senator McCarthy of the Red Scare.
Right.
Kind of playing devil's advocate for Samsung as to why they might go with Tizen. Fair enough. He makes a lot of good points about, Android's controlled by Google.
Yeah. Well,
ultimately, I still don't think Tizen's going to do well.
It makes sense strategically for Samsung to keep Tizen on the back burner. There is a really interesting problem that Android faces right now, and that is Samsung really dominates the Android ecosystem to a pretty major degree. So I believe the next market share manufacturer is HTC with 7% of the Android market. I believe Samsung holds 47%. I could have these numbers wrong, but I believe it's something to this effect. Samsung has 47% of the Android market. So this puts Google in a really tough spot, because that means the majority of their Android deployment is by Samsung. And that means if Samsung wants something changed in Android, they have a ton of pressure they can apply to Google, and it would make sense that maybe they would keep this Tizen project going, so that way if Google isn't complying in some sense that Samsung wants, they can say, well, you know what? We're going to dust off Tizen and maybe throw this on a few devices and see how it does. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure it's I don't think it's a North American, Western European play.
Yeah,
much like Firefox OS. But yeah, it'll probably get some market.
Well, why not? Why not? You know, somewhere where there's a market for it, wherever this mythological place is that everybody will write in and tell me how wrong I'm about, because it really does exist, and maybe, you know, you build it there, you mature it there, you iterate, and then you can keep it making money, you can keep it moving forward, you can justify spending money on it, and then if Google does start to become some sort of issue, they say, well, look, we've got this that we've been working on for years. It's really not going to take us that much to deploy it on our phones. Google, don't you want to do this change to Android for us?
Well, I mean, the market does exist, right? I mean, that's where Firefox and a number of the other alternative systems are aiming for. It's that, you know, $100 phone market.
Why can't that same exact market be served by Android, like Android 2.2 or 2.3?
Well, Android 2.2 is just
I know,
just a hot mess.
No, I know, but that doesn't stop any Chinese manufacturer from slapping it on a device. And see,
well, I think I think part of it is these manufacturers want to start getting a cut of the ecosystem. The carriers would like to get a cut of that as well.
Yeah, okay, definitely. There's definitely that. The carriers for sure, right? If the carriers could have a little, it'd almost be like the carrier's operating system in a sense. But here's what I figure is one of the things that I think us average consumers don't quite appreciate from just the purchasing end of the supply chain is all of like the system on the chips and all of those boards are being built and certified and tested against Android. And so when you call up and you want to, you know, put in a purchase order to manufacture a tablet, if you're not deploying Android on that tablet, you get no idea really of what's going to work, what the licensing is, what the drivers are, and all this kind of stuff. And this was the major issue that the Vivaldi project ran into when they were trying to build their Plasma Active tablet, is they wanted to build something that ran Linux, but everything was targeted for Android. So if you didn't speak Android requirements and kernels and versions and drivers, you were completely speaking a different language. And quite literally, these Chinese manufacturers speak a different language. So it's very hard to go outside their limited, narrow understanding of what their manufacturing plant deals with. And this, so what you are proposing when you're saying Tizen will take off in the third world markets that supposedly exist, that there's supposedly millions of people that are going to buy $100 phones. What you're saying is that somebody, and maybe it's Samsung, is going to come along and create a phone from the ground up that they can get complete driver support for, that's functional, that serves a purpose for a decent cost, and they're going to ship this OS that nobody's using, that there's no apps for, that there's no demand for.
Well, they already have. I mean,
versus taking inventory that already exists, that has drivers and hardware that's already been certified for an operating system, and just taking those images and deploying them on existing phones or cheap phones. And I just don't see it.
It's not the way the usage is going, though. I mean, I just, not recently, but several months back, read a great post about how Facebook has made deals with carriers in Africa to make Facebook data free, and they're paying to be pre-installed on those phones. Mm-hmm. On those lower end pseudo, just above feature phones.
Yeah, I do agree. My whole argument
it's a totally different market.
I do agree. My whole argument kind of hinges on
the ecos. Yeah.
Yeah, and if the carrier comes in and says, we want a branded operating system with our branded apps, that we've built up this content ecosystem. And, in a lot of these third world countries, like the carrier's even involved in micropayments. And so they have this whole financial banking aspect to their business too. And so if they said, this is our, telco phone, and you just get this phone, that's where I could see it working out. But then, is that really a win? Because then it's just Tizen that's been mutated into some sort of shovelware device.
It's a win for Samsung because that's money, it's revenue, right? I mean, the supposedly and according to all the news reports, phones in those markets are used as people's their personal computer, their banking device. It serves a much different role than say North America and Europe, and even it's very different.
I don't like it because it's more limited, it's more constricted. I think it's
More
sad.
limited, but it's also priced very, very differently,
And
right?
but I almost wonder if it's the backdoor way into limiting and walling off the internet and content, and putting gates around independent media and independent apps.
Oh, I'm pretty sure you. I mean, I don't know for a fact.
I mean, how would you get your app into one of these carrier stores? Who knows, right?
You right now it's not about apps, right? Right now,
Right.
the,
But someday,
quote, apps they have installed are a Facebook web view that the big thing is they don't have to pay to use.
right.
It's a total, no one's buying CodeJournal on what's free anyway, but no one's buying Angry Birds for 99 cents and if they're using that type of phone and if they're in that type of situation. It's just a totally different way of doing things. And that's what Firefox OS is going for. I mean, granted, you're right. Smartphones will start to go to that market as they become cheaper. But the model of selling apps to those people, at least at the rates we're selling them here, that's going to be pretty tough, right?
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
So it's going to have to be a different model. Facebook has found a model. A lot of it seems like getting into bed with the carriers is the way it goes.
I mean, that's fine, but then it's also possible that these platforms could become havens for piracy. Right, because if they don't have a legitimate means to get the cool apps that everybody's talking about, especially as more and more things go HTML5, these little devices will.
What was it, Alibaba or Ali? I forgot what it was. The pirated Android app store,
right?
That Google had a corn area about.
Yeah, right, yeah.
These things already exist in those locales. It's just they're not so common here.
Yeah, okay.
So it's a totally different market.
You almost, yeah. I mean, you almost.
If you think about it, people complain that World of Warcraft is $15 in the United States and obviously North America.
Is it really still $15?
$15 a month, as well as in Europe.
They should lower that to $9.99.
But in Asia, it's priced very differently. It's pay as you go.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah.
It's companies are more than willing to meet the market level. So it's going to be a totally different ballgame.
Yeah, it's a little too bad because I think as especially in those areas, as those devices become the common computing platform, which is much more of a reality over there than it would be
here. Well, they're
here.
much more important, yeah, than they are here for sure.
I think it's a little sad that we've sort of invented the most fundamental and efficient way for humans to communicate and share knowledge all over the world, and they're not going to have as free access to it as everyone else. And maybe I'm going too far with it. Maybe they'll have a completely unrestricted web browser that'll let them get to anything they want. But
they do. They have to pay for the service.
I just have such disdain and distrust for the carriers that if you give them an option like this, who knows what they're going to do with it. I don't like it. And I think that, I know everybody hates it when I do this, but I honestly think that was the number one thing that Apple got right, is they compromised on which carrier they would go with so they did not have to compromise on putting shovelware on the device, right? They wanted Verizon, but Verizon was like, yeah, right. You're not going to let us. Yeah, right. Nobody dictates terms to us. Get the F out of our office, Steve. And he had to go to Singular. And Singular was a nobody at the time. I mean, they don't even exist anymore, but they were a nobody at the time. And he said, we just won't do it. We won't compromise the device. And Google has made concessions in that regard. But this is on a whole nother level, right? This is my problem with Ubuntu as well, is Ubuntu's moving to this touch direction, but their ultimate customer is the carrier. So after all of this Ubuntu upheaval, after all of these changes, after all of this technology rebuilding, at the end of the day, are they just building a platform that's going to provide a shovelware stage?
I mean, I think it's a little unfair to do a one-to-one corollary between Apple, Google, and Canonical in that case, because Apple's business model, do you like it or not, is the simplest. It's, we're going to charge you a lot, make a high margin off each phone you buy, and that's it. Google, we're going to hope you use the phone with Android on it so we can get more data on you, sell it, and hopefully you browse the web and see some of our ads. And canonical is to be determined, right?
They sell to the carrier. They've said
Right.
it. They've said it.
Right. So
I think that's the most dangerous of all of them.
it's interesting that you think that, but then you, of course, you have an Android pick of the week. I'm not totally trying to hate on Android because I know people get upset when I hate on the open sourcey stuff. But it's a little disingenuous to say, I don't want to pay these high prices, Apple overcharges, Microsoft overcharges, and then to complain about things like, they're catering to the carriers, they're selling my data, they're serving the ads.
I don't see
You're going to pay one way or the other, whether it's the carrier or installing VCast on your phone.
Yeah.
Or it's you've paid $300 for a cell phone. You're paying no matter, somebody's got to pay. There's no free ride.
I agree. I think what I'm more concerned about is these platforms like Firefox OS, Tizen, and Ubuntu are not going to be viable targets for people like yourself or me. They're going to be owned and locked up by these major corporations that are proven to be, troublesome, and they're gonna potentially be silos onto their own. I mean, what if AT&T had their fork of Tizen, right? And maybe Verizon has their own version of Firefox
there's never
OS.
going to be,
They
the
create
equivalent.
silos.
There's never going to be the equivalent of the Apple App Store for Tizen or for Firefox OS. It's never going to be that big. It's never going to have the money. It's never going to have the prestige. So it's not going to get the same attention. So, all right, let's go down this path since we've started. You're very concerned with carrier control, but you don't seem super concerned with how much of your data is going to these private or public, in some cases, companies.
Well, what can I do in that regard?
Well, you cannot buy the product whose business model is to harvest data. And I'm saying this as someone who uses Google Plus and Google Apps.
Well, see, to me,
yeah.
I want to use the apps and the services that I want to use, and if the Android platform lets me do it, then that is the functionality I want from the device. I think the disconnect is everybody's excited about these other platforms, and they're not going to end up providing what we want. They're going to be these shovelware systems. They're not going to be. So it's like they're going to steal our identity, and we're not going to be able to use them the way we want. That kind of stuff. Or not steal our identity, but steal our metrics, whatever.
Our data. Which, I'm okay for trading data, but I do feel like you should be compensated since it has value.
Wouldn't that be interesting?
I'm deadly serious. Like, I feel Gmail compensates me for my data by using the service, but Android, I worry, doesn't. Or I've given it more data.
I feel like I would be a lot more comfortable with Android. So my ideal world would be like Ubuntu Touch on any device I want, and it's my own stock image. It's not carrier controlled, and I have a lot more faith that it's not tracking me. What I would like from Google is, what metrics are they gathering? Are they storing my cell phone tower location all the time? Are they, checking what IP I'm logging in from? Probably. And there's other things I'd like. Is the face unlock feature in Jelly Bean, is that being used to train a facial recognition system? And they must be cloud processing my face to do that? I mean, I would like more information on all of this kind of stuff.
You know what I'd really like? I'd like to be able to give them $100 or $200 or whatever to sign a document that they guarantee they won't keep my data.
Like a commitment policy kind of a thing.
I'd like to buy them out of their interest.
Wouldn't that be great?
Right?
Well,
even if that's $1,000, because it's going to be a lot of money, because people underestimate data a lot. Like, a lot of the times the equation is far in favor of the company harvesting the data.
Well, now, I mean, I know our sponsorship segment's over, but like Mirrorcode's saying, like with Ting, so I'm buying a service where it's the pricing model's good, so okay, from the carrier end that's good, but then the phone I'm buying is unlocked. It's not going to have carrier apps on it. So in Android, there is a path for me to follow to get a brand new state-of-the-art device that is not loaded down. Whereas with Tizen and Firefox OS and Ubuntu, that's likely your only purchase option is from some carrier who's ruined it.
Yeah, maybe I shouldn't say this, but I will. I feel like a lot of the JB feedback I've been getting about Tizen and Firefox OS is because a certain set of the audience is a little disenchanted with Android. They felt it was going to be the great Linux hope, and then Google said, "What's Linux?"
Oh, we have people in our audience that just hate it.
Take a walk. I don't give a rat's ass about you hippies. Like, and unfortunately, we talked about in the early episodes why I licensed thing under BSD or Apache. It's because I don't, I prefer to never be in the position where, it just gets messy, right? Because now there's all this, maybe, Android is doing better on the client side than any other form of Linux. And I think that's a fair assertion in terms of market share.
On the client side, yeah.
Yeah, certainly not on, server, it still dominates. And I think there's a lot of, not, maybe jealousy is the right word. I was going to say not jealousy, but.
Envy?
Yeah, because, it's Android, but it's kind of not, right? I mean, Linux was kind of not. For all intents and purposes, it's Java. Right? Like when you hook into it, it's Java. It functions like a Java device. Yeah, it's got a Linux kernel, so it is Linux. That's fair enough. So I remember years ago, when Android was coming out, how excited all the Linux publications and podcasts were, right? This was the great hope. And you yourself, you personally. Yeah, a little bit. Definitely your former co-host.
I think I probably was. Yeah, I probably was. Yeah.
And pretty much all the other Linux podcasts I was listening to at the time.
Well, and the Google love was particularly strong back then. They were really in this. That was like the golden age of Google.
And now the word open, I think a lot of people are starting to realize that's a marketing term. Open doesn't mean anything to Google, at least, or to companies like Google.
Well, gosh, I mean, I hate to come to their defense, but they do publish the code.
They certainly follow the letter of the law. That's absolutely true. Whether they follow the spirit or not,
right? Like they took forever with the honeycomb code.
Listen, I'm not saying they should do more than they're legally obligated to do. I'm saying that it's okay to, if you legitimately think Firefox OS is going to go somewhere, to support it and develop for it. And I think that's great.
Oh, yeah.
But if you're doing this as a business, you need to re-examine, are you letting your personal, perhaps prejudices, because if it's a business, it can be pretty serious. You might have a family. Like, that's what I'm mostly concerned with.
Yeah, I've definitely been thinking of this from the money-making perspective. If you're an enthusiast, or you want to help if you want to help the OS succeed, one of the best things you could do is make a great app for it.
Sure. I mean, if you're just a guy who works 9 to 5 and has a Tux plushie on his shelf and is just a big enthusiast, knock yourself out. But if you're an ISV and you're moving resources away from Android towards one of these new OSs, that's a risk. Maybe, and if you're right, it will pay off handsomely. But if you're wrong, you're going to be really wrong.
Minimum viable product. Make one of those, and then see how it does. Yeah,
and I'm thinking minimum. And also, if they are in bed with the carriers, does that change the 30-70 split that's become standard?
How do you even?
You don't even know the deal yet.
Like, I mean, so Firefox OS. What we do know about Firefox OS, we know more about Firefox OS than I'd say Tizen really. At least as far as like Firefox OS is really going to be built for HTML5 applications.
Yeah, Firefox OS I think is a more wise choice between the two.
Yeah, exactly. And the Mozilla Foundation, is well respected. They've got a lot of energy behind it. They're making headlines almost every single week. So there does seem to be a little more smoke and fire over there.
Yeah, and also, and I think you were kind of alluding to this, Tizen is kind of Samsung's bully pulpit for Android, right?
That's what I think.
If you don't cooperate, we could always bring this to your most valuable markets, North America and
exactly.
Europe.
That's my thing. My thought is they've got that option at least.
Yeah, it's a way to. I mean, we've gone down this road a lot, and I'm sure we're going to get a lot of very passionate email, shall we say, or YouTube comments.
CodaRadio@JupiterBroadcasting.com.
No. Balance. Unfilter at Coda. Damn it.
Or hit the contact link at the top of the Jupiter Broadcasting website.
All right, so we should move on from this because that was just one feedback.
I know. I know. We went way too far on that. So all right, but thought provoking. Thank you, MacArthur.
Yeah, it's very thought. See, that's a good email when it blows up the topic for the show.
Yeah.
All right, so Michael writes in asking how important warnings are. They're important. Damn it. Don't ignore them.
Is this going back to the logging discussion?
I think so.
Yeah.
He just asked the question directly in an email. They are very important. Stop ignoring them.
That's it. Okay.
That's it.
Short answer.
In fact, in most IDEs, you can treat warnings as errors. So
now, Jed sent us a voicemail, but it was a little inaudible. Should I play like a clip just to like show, just so we?
No, it was pretty rough.
It was rough.
I don't know what it would do over YouTube in the stream.
Yeah.
But
Okay. All right.
So,
okay.
Jed, I only got like the first minute of your voicemail, and that was audible. And Jed wanted, at least his first point was that he wanted more information on specific types of logging. So we can talk about that a little. Depending on what you're developing, there's obviously different kinds. The one that usually annoys me the most is when people are doing native applications and they don't have crash logging, right? That reports back to the development team. So on mobile, there's things like TestFlight that can do that, which TestFlight is actually coming out with support for Android very soon. So that's nice.
Oh.
But there's also, there's all kinds of logging on the server side, and I think Chris could probably tell you tons about that.
Oh yeah, and if that is really something I would really, as a sysadmin, I so often find that applications don't properly give me enough information in the log, and so there's a couple of different ways I find that people handle this. You can always, write out to the standard system log or syslog, something like that.
Yeah, I don't like that.
And then there's also, you can run the app like in debug mode, where like a lot of command line apps, you'll have like a -D and it gives you a whole lot more information, or -V for verbose or whatever it might be. And those are always really nice for troubleshooting mode. So as somebody who's on the other end of this, it's not just for you developers to figure it out, but it also gives me a clue of what might be broken.
It's very important on both the client and server. I mean, on the client side, you definitely want to log crashes at the bare minimum. You probably want to log, any real-world example. Hate to use iOS, but it's easy.
Hey-o!
You have very good. There's a core data error, which can be a little nasty. Best to log that out and get that sent back to you. On the server side, same idea. Any kind of data writing error, you probably want to log out so you have to make sure the integrity of your data is not being damaged. There's a bunch of platform-specific stuff. I can think of a number of things in Rails you would want to be logging. I'm finding that in Java Play, there are also a number of things you want to log. But yeah, Jed, it's hard to really go into detail because it's specific to what you're writing and what framework you're using in regards to how to do it. What I would say is that a lot of open source developers have taken a lot of pain to make logging easy, particularly on the server side. So even if you just log the standard out, it shouldn't be hard, right? I mean, Rails makes it easy, Play makes it easy. And if you want to go more sophisticated, you can, where you can do, email reporting or something like that.
Very nice.
Oh, also log memory warnings.
Yes.
Yeses.
Do you think this might be a good spot to take a break and take care of a little
business? No.
Oh, man. I need more sound clips, you guys. Email those to coderradio@jupiterbroadcasting.com.
Go for it.
All right. Before we jump into the hoopla this week, I'd like to take a moment and thank GoDaddy.com, new sponsors to the Coder Radio program. They've been listeners, and they said, gosh, we love that Coder Radio. And they know that you guys out there are building projects, and you need a lot of their services, so they're here, and we're going to tell you about them. Now, for the introductory offer they have for you guys, you can get a .com for $2.95. Use the code CODER295 when you check out. CODER295 when you check out. We'll get you that .com for $2.95. Now, we all know there's plenty of other domains out there. In fact, to make this easy, there's a little drop down on GoDaddy's site. Yeah, you got .biz, .us, .mx. Yeah, okay, those are great. But let's be serious. If I've got a .com for you for $2.95, you need to get the .com. Even if you got to come up with some crazy name, the .com is classic. Even if it's some sort of iteration on a something else you've already got, use Coder295 and grab a .com version, because let's be honest, .com's where it's at. I think I've got a JBLive.tv, man. I know. I don't mean to get you upset, but let's be honest with ourselves. .com is where it's at. So go to GoDaddy.com. Go buy a .com of what you need and use the code CODER295 when you check out. And remember, one of the great benefits of using a service like GoDaddy is they are the world's leading domain name registrar. So if you're working with a client and you need to step away and you want them to be able to renew that domain, you want them to be able to use their own credit card, you don't want to have to hassle with all that stuff, you don't want to get a call in a year when it needs renewed, use GoDaddy because they've got a very easy handoff process and you won't get stuck later on. If you're doing this for your work, if you're doing this for your client, if you're doing it for a family member, use GoDaddy and use our code CODER295 when you check out. And thank you to GoDaddy for supporting
Hey,
the show.
Chris, I just used the code to register a new domain name. Why didn't you check the chat? I sent you a screenshot.
Oh, yeah? Okay, let me see. I don't see it from you. What are you talking about? There's nothing in the chat
not
room.
the chat. I'm sorry. Check the notes.
Oh, the notes? Oh, okay. Boy, you are sleep deprived, aren't you? Oh, look at that. Oh, nice. That's not a .com though. That's not a .com. That's you got me Chris Fisher.XXX. Thank you. That could come in handy because I was always thinking if this podcasting thing didn't work out.
I figured it's really a growth opportunity. You could pivot, right?
Yeah.
Pivot to porn. Oh, that's the show title, isn't it?
Pivot to porn. I don't know if we can pull that out of iTunes if we pivot to porn. I tell you, you could have, but you didn't get a .com. You could have got it for $2.95.
Well, see, I'm protecting your brand.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's too funny. That is too funny. Congratulations. All right. So, Xamarin, which used to be Easel, which then became... then got consumed by Novell, and they created MonoDevelop, and then broke out on their own and became Xamarin, right?
It's complicated, so it's not quite like that. Okay, so apparently it's called Xamarin, not Xamarin. I was corrected this week.
What a stupid name.
So I have to question their naming, because Xamarin sounds a lot better.
That's it. I'm done.
That's it? You're done with them?
He's a jackass.
No, it's fine. Okay, so it's supposed to be not what is it? Xamarin?
Apparently it's Xamarin.
Xamarin, okay.
Okay. So I have been playing with it for a little over a week now since it came out. It's interesting. I don't know how to say this nicely. MonoDevelop sucks. So, Xamarin has their own IDE now, which is great.
Wow, I've always heard MonoDevelop wasn't bad.
Oh, it sucks. I'm sorry. It's like it's okay. Like Xcode is okay.
Okay.
I might just be bitter though, because Xcode is awful. Anyway, the Xamarin IDE is a lot nicer, but it really, Xamarin's focused not necessarily on mono, but more on the mono mobile aspects. And they've actually don't support a lot of the old mono development stuff. So like ASP.NET and basically that. But at a larger level, remember, Chris, I think it was episode 4, we talked about write once, run anywhere.
Right. I mean, this has always been sort of the promise of mono, right?
Thank you, Mr. Roboto.
But their specialty is more like creating the bottom layer of the application, right?
So it's interesting what they're doing. So let's say you have model view controller, right? Your models and your controllers can be reused for, let's say you're doing a Windows Phone, iOS, and Android. Or more realistically, iOS and Android.
Okay.
But your views and maybe part of your controllers need to be rewritten from scratch for each. It's interesting, right? It's trying to get around the quote Android, the quote Java app look on the desktop. Right, so the idea is that a mono-develop app looks like a native app.
Because the front end is essentially native, right?
Right, it's a C# wrapper.
Yeah.
Well, it's a little complicated, but the way the API looks in iOS, there's a class called UI View Controller, and mono in Xamarin. See, I'm still calling it mono, which is great.
Is MonoDevelop dead now?
No, I think they're just separate now.
Okay.
Which is a shame because this is a much better IDE.
Why would I want? Now, this is an honest question. I'm not trying to be stupid, but why would I want this over just using the tools available to develop for iOS? Is it just so that way I can leverage?
This is where I got a little lost. So one thing is, I generally work on a Mac, so having their IDE was great.
But this only works on a Mac, right? This
right,
says
but they have a Visual Studio plugin. So they've always had the Visual Studio plugin. The Mac IDE is new, and I think it runs on Linux, but I'm not sure.
I know the chat room says it doesn't.
Oh, so it's Mac only.
Yeah.
Okay, but the IDE aside, right? Because that's not a huge deal. Most people, I get the sense most people using this are actually developing in Visual Studio.
Okay.
I'm not a huge .NET guy. I've certainly done some .NET. I recently shipped a project for the Windows Store. But I'm more than comfortable in Objective-C as well, and Java. So I kind of had to ask myself, why would I either recommend this to someone when there is a licensing fee, or pick this for myself?
This, to me, I mean, I'm looking at the price. So their Enterprise Edition is almost $2,000. And
I mean, to be fair, though, most people are going to be fine with the Indie Edition if they're just a small-time client, and the Business Edition will do it for it's $1,000 off the top of whatever you're going to charge for consulting, or on top of that, I should say. Yeah, it's expensive, right?
Yeah, and I just think that what this to me sounds like is this is targeted at Windows developers who want to move their iOS app. They want to take their app and move it over to iOS, right?
Yeah, and I don't want to hit this too hard, but I get the sense it's targeted at people who've been in the .NET space for a while and are trying to move into something more, hip.
They're jumping ship and they need a bridge.
And they need a bridge, or maybe they're not necessarily jumping ship, but they, Objective-C is very foreign to them.
Right.
And while you're at it, you may as well get Android support. The problem I have is that, in theory, it's great. I mean, it's a good idea, right? The bottom layers of your app, so to speak, can be shared because the business logic is business logic is business logic, right? I mean, it's not a big deal.
No, it's just
business. Interacting with the server, fine. But then you have to rewrite all your views, and at least my experience writing mobile apps, especially on iOS, has been a lot of your QA issues and a lot of your time actually goes on that view layer. And that's where a lot of the cost goes. So you're duplicating that for two platforms. Now, if you're writing an app that's not super designed, or it doesn't have a lot of design or skeuomorphism going on, maybe it's not so bad. But I'm just thinking that's a lot.
Yeah. So you're now, this is not necessarily a bad thing, but what you're kind of saying there is this isn't really saving you on the part that takes the most time and energy. It's like you're able to, you can build the business end of it, and that is, great, but honestly not as much work typically as the front end.
In my experience, that's true.
Right. I mean, gosh, I'm probably going to get a lot of hate for this, but the Xamarin guys remind me of the classic problem that we seem to have in open source, and that was their roots. They're no longer really so much, but I mean, I don't know what the licenses are.
So so that's another interesting point. Not to sidetrack you, but so the Xamarin IDE is built on the mono-developed core,
right? But
they're very quick to say, "Oh, but don't worry, we built all the important parts."
Yeah.
So they're very. It's really an interesting idea.
I think for certain elements of the Mac development community, open source has a real stigma. There's sort of an anti-source. Really?
Most Mac developers I work with.
I'm not saying they won't take advantage of open source and use it, but
I would say that free software has a stigma.
What was that editor, the Mac editor that went open source, and just about every big Mac head had a total kitten over it because, oh my God, it went open source, it's the end of the world. What was that?
TextMate 2.
Yeah, you see,
TextMate 1.
They hate open source.
They loved it. I mean, he got a beautiful write-up in ours. I hated it.
So my point is, though,
open source is the most important part.
These guys who come from an open source heritage, one of the classic problems is they really get off on infrastructure. Infrastructure this, infrastructure that, infrastructure. Right. So they have built the tool so that you can build your own ultimate portable infrastructure. And that is a needed market, but it seems like the reality is, like, if I was going to build an iOS app, I would just, I don't know why. If I'm only building for iOS, there really seems no point in using this. And if I'm only building for Android, there really seems no point in using this.
Okay, so this is where it gets a little messy, right? That was my question, but you know, I- originally I saw this not as a tool for first-party development, but as for consulting. Because a lot of people call me and their budgets aren't quite where they need to be, right? So you need to, I'm sure you've had this in sysadmin too. And a lot of the times it ends up being that we go with something like PhoneGap, to kind of get into their range. At first, I was hoping this would be a faster PhoneGap, right? And I definitely understand why they want you to write the views twice, but that does add a significant cost in terms of time, which equates to money.
Now, it does mean you could sort of build up a library of some of this stuff, and then you could then take something you wrote for an Android client and reuse some of this for the iOS version and save yourself time and make more money.
You could, but it's super unlikely. In my experience, it's always that last QA cycle where they start talking about design that things get hairy. Or that's where, if you were under budget, that's where you hit your budget. And I just, I would love to be wrong, right? But I don't see how this is a game changer, particularly because of the licensing fee. So any of the costs saved to the client, we're then throwing $1,000 back on. Because if they're doing 2 apps, they have to have the business license.
So I think this is interesting because
it's a great idea, and if I was shipping an app that I wanted to be cross-platform, and for whatever reason I didn't want to go the HTML5 route,
like a video game.
Yeah. Well, so okay, it gets weirder, Chris. The relationship to this and mono game isn't exactly clear.
Okay, because it seems like the natural tie-in.
You can use them together, but you don't really.
I mean, that seems like the perfect use of the two.
Right, mono game is great, but mono game is kind of its own. Mono game's kind of its own beast, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of things you have to consider even going the mono game route before you look at this.
And whoa, hi there. And with with Microsoft sort of sunsetting XNA, what's the real likely long-term future for monogame? Because monogame is an open source implementation of XNA.
Well, I think monogame's doing just fine. I mean, I'm following them on GitHub, and I'm constantly getting notifications.
I don't. But I mean, do you think 3 years from now people are going to create new games using monogame when the?
I think monogame is either going to go away, but I think more likely it's going to evolve out of its baby XN or its XNA 2.0.
Come in, yeah.
Stack.
And
it's going to be its own thing,
yeah.
And XNA is going to be a distant memory.
That'd be interesting.
Or it'll fade because they have to, right? And looking, kind of following what they're doing, they kind of are doing their own thing now. Like they're not so worried about being XNA plus.
Okay, that's cool. I love they got support listed.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They're going in directions that certainly complicate the framework, though, right?
What I think is interesting about what Xamarin's doing is how aggressively they're going after the Mac market. So Miguel has come out and said, "Oh, I'm a Mac user. I've switched to hey everybody, I switched to the Mac. Yeah. You all should know this." Of course, he did it years ago. In fact, remember there's just a hoopla not too long ago, and it was right in there. He was a Mac user.
Why he didn't like the Linux desktop anymore. I think.
But they're also buying ads on a lot of Mac publications like daringfireball.net. So they bought, and here's their ad read. Xamarin blends the iOS and C# world together in only a way that seasoned iOS developers accept. Raw access to every iOS API combined with all of C#'s great features and functional style programming, language integrated query, and seamless processing of XML, JSON, and web services. And that's sort of their I think the key words in that pitch are seasoned iOS developers, raw access to every iOS API,
right?
And I think that I think those are sort of like the key points they want to hit on in this what is really a 1-paragraph sales pitch that they probably paid $6,500 for. What?
It's I don't know how closely you follow iOS developer publications.
Not very.
There is one language iOS devs, with the exception of me and a few others, really don't like. That language would be Java. So one of the reasons you sometimes from indie developers won't see them go to Android, or like Marco Arment did, will just contract out the Android version, is because they just don't want to deal with it. And that's fair enough. I have to say, when I left my early job working Java and freaking Eclipse all day, I did not want to write any more Java for a while.
Well, is this maybe the opposite then? Is this for iOS developers who want to abandon ship and move over to Android?
No, I'm sorry, you can't ship a product like Xamarin without getting iOS on board.
Right, but I mean, let's be honest, Android's kind of blowing up. I mean, maybe people want to move their iOS apps over.
Android's blowing up, but I mean, very anecdotally, because I haven't done a study, but I can only tell you what I've seen in the last year or 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. When someone comes to me with a budget for an iOS project, they're far closer to being reasonable than they are with Android. And
what do you mean in terms of cost?
In terms of cost, in terms of, they're hiring a designer. When they go for iOS, they've really got a nice tier designer.
Well, I mean, that's all going to change with time, right? Don't you think?
Maybe. I mean, I think sure it will get better.
Like, did you see this post from the Pocket Cast guys that was linked to us on Google Plus? Where basically,
yeah, and their post makes a lot of sense, because why the hell would they want to compete with Apple?
Right, but they're saying we're seeing 4x the sales rate on Android than we are, and of course that makes sense. There's a very competitive podcast client market on iOS, and plus Apple has their own. And Listen's dead on Android. But I that is not the first post I've seen where they've said we're seeing 4x, 5x. There was another blog post recently that says we release on Android first because we have more sales there now.
So you're conflating a few things, though, right? So the developers often see the next trend before the biz devs and investors do.
Sure.
A lot of these folks are just throwing money into iOS and are just throwing money into tablet apps. So Android definitely has room to grow, but if Xamarin didn't get some serious iOS support, iOS and Mac developer support, it wasn't going to go anywhere. Android wouldn't be enough, because a lot of iOS developers who are contractors, do moonlight as Android developers. I mean, basically that's what I do, right? I do mostly Mac and iOS now with some, although Chris, to be honest, HTML5 has been
blowing up.
We should talk about it.
It's what your most recent couple of gigs have been all about, right?
Well, I mean, so it's interesting. I've been writing a lot of native components with tying into HTML5. But yeah, HTML5 has certainly grown for me. It's definitely grown faster than native Android did.
Well, that's interesting. Well, I mean, yeah. I guess I'm pleased, because then everybody gets to have fun, right?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I can type, input type equals date, and it just does it for me now, when, 10 months ago that wasn't the case, right? You needed a crazy PhoneGap plugin to do that. So I'm very happy with the way things have gone with WebKit. And I say WebKit in particular because, use WebKit.
Microsoft has just sent us an email and said that they feel like you should check out Internet Explorer for mobile, and they would appreciate it if maybe you could reconsider.
If I would just stop doing tac WebKit, even when it doesn't need it, just kind of I would just throw it everywhere.
Right.
I don't actually do that. People who are going to rage me out in the emails.
So,
no.
Any kind of wrap thoughts to just sort of wrap up the Xamarin?
I don't mean to poo-poo it. I think it's an interesting idea. Architecturally, it is a great way to develop an app. But to pitch it to a client versus HTML5, when they don't have a budget, is going to be hard. Or if they do have a budget, and they really are interested in the best user experience, pitching this versus double native, so native on each platform, is also questionable to me.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to see, maybe if you're developing an indie app for yourself and you're going to sell it, yeah, maybe that would make a lot of sense, because then the indie license is only $300 instead of $1,000.
Yeah, their prices are a little high for the bigger stuff, but for the average Joe, I guess it's not too prohibitive.
I mean, to their credit, their prices used to be higher and used to be able to not start for free. Now they're letting you start for free. So, or they kind of could start for free before. One other key that we haven't discussed, maybe we'll discuss it next week, is Mono Mac, which they're pushing pretty hard. Which I think is a non-starter, but
Yeah, I mean, whatever. It just that does.
if you're writing a Mac app and you're going to put it on the Mac App Store and you're not writing it in Cocoa, that's...
I'd be curious if people think I'm wrong, but it seems to me possibly like mono. I mean, with HTML5 taking off and all this kind of stuff, maybe they're trying to solve last year's problem.
Well, I will say within from the last 2 years, HTML5 has come from I thought it was so slow it wasn't viable, right? To I've shipped already several products on it this year. The year is very young.
Yeah, a lot of that's because of improvements in WebKit and Chrome and efforts from Google.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, if you just cap Android, say 2.3.3 or better, you're okay. Like, and the same thing for iOS. If you say 5.0 plus, your JavaScript is going to be good enough, right, to get away with it.
Sir, I have a Ninja pick of the week that we could cover before we get out of here.
Oh, Ninja!
So I have just never been a big touchpad guy. I mean, the latest generation of touchpads on all my gear is pretty good, but I still prefer a mouse in the hand. And there's a new version that came out just a little bit ago of my favorite portable mouse. It's small but very comfortable to use. I've got the MX the Anywhere MX Logitech series, and I wanted to give this a plug because they revved it. I own 4 of these things. They've got a good weight to them. They've got a really good scroller, which has I don't know if you can hear the click of it, but
Is this wireless or no?
Oh yeah, and the wireless is real
nice.
good, and you can tuck the little receiver up into the butt of it, so that way it's portable and you don't lose it. And it's got the micro USB style that's really small. It doesn't take up a ton of room, so it's just a little guy. Like I said, I have a bunch of these. All of the computers out in the studio, even for my non-portable systems, I use this mouse because it's just so reliable and the battery works forever. And I have one of these in my laptop bag, and it works great with every operating system I use too. I really like, so it's this Logitech Wireless Anywhere Mouse MX, and they released this new version, and you can now get it with the Amazon frustration-free packaging too, which is nice.
Epic.
Should
we plug my mouse or no?
Well, I don't know. I actually don't know. The new mouse. I don't know. It might only be available for pre-order now, I think, but it's going to be available very soon. So that's my pick, because I have the version I have right now is the one I have like a whole bunch of, which is It's the 910, but see, they're replacing the 910 with a slightly updated version. So you can get either one, but I would go ahead and order the new one, just so that way you have the latest model. Which should be shipping
Chris, we
soon.
have to have dueling mice real quick.
What do you got? I'll look for it.
Check it.
Okay.
It is, I'm linking it in the chat.
Okay.
It is the Naga Death Eater infrared gaming mouse. To go with my DOS keyboard, it has to be just as epic.
So you're all about wired here, and I totally agree for gaming. This is nice.
Yeah. Well, I just... I have all these Apple mice and trackpads and keyboards, and I seem to never have AA batteries.
How bright is that scroll wheel?
It's not as bright as they make it look on Amazon.
But does it kind of glow up? Does it kind of glow like the area a little bit? Because that'd be kind of cool. I mean, let's be honest.
A little. I mean, it's currently very bright here, but I mean, in the room, because it's
You like
new.
I've played with a few other people on my old gaming guilds that use the Naga, and they really like them.
Yeah, I don't even know how to program the buttons, to be honest with you. I just like that when I figured out how in Sublime Text to use the side buttons to jump X lines up and down in my code.
They have a Transformers Optimus Prime edition and Megatron edition.
Optimus.
Ooh, the Megatron's nice.
Ooh. I mean, that is a... why are we nerding out about mice?
Dude, a good peripheral is important.
That's true.
Helps you compute good. All right, well, I'll put links to both those in the chat, in the show notes if folks want to grab those, and grabbing those will support the show. Did you, before we go, did you want to talk at all about this code.org shenanigans that are going on? That we cover a little bit on TechSnap, but...
what was it?
Code.org, have you heard about this? They're getting celebrities involved.
Oh, yeah.
To get programming taught in schools, etc.
Yeah, they should teach basic programming in schools like they did in my school. But we can talk about it next week if you want.
I had a little basic training when I was in school. Yeah. A little Q basic, as a matter of fact.
I don't necessarily mean basic the language before you send in the hate mail.
I did. That's what I would learn.
That's what I learned too. Yeah. But
Hello World. I managed to do a Hello World. Actually, I had a pretty cool little game I made.
I had a little rocket ship flying up the screen or something lame like that.
Whoa! Seriously?
Lame old... Well, it was made out of like ASCII characters.
Yeah, right? That's cool though. Man, you're hardcore. All right, well, we covered a lot of ground this week, so if you know, if we said something that you think is crazy or that you want to correct or whatever it might be, there's a few ways you can get a hold of us. Now, first of all, don't forget, we would really like to have you join us next week live at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, jblive.tv. Come up. Once you arrive, we'll give you information on how to contact us. We're not giving it out right now. We're going to wait till you're there, and then we're going to want to get your calls. Now, we'll probably have to come up with a few questions to throw out there to get the ball rolling, but we'd really like any topics we've covered recently, or here's a big one. If you send in an email and we've missed it, because sometimes we have a high volume and some slip through the cracks, great time to call in and follow up. If you've ever thought about leaving us a voicemail or recording something, just call in and just talk to us directly. We'd love to hear you guys.
And we'll even add, if you have a war story that's less than, let's say, 5 minutes long to share, call in.
And if we don't get any calls and only one person calls in, then we need like an hour-long war story.
Yeah. So just let you know, the show length is going to be more or less entirely up to you.
Yeah, totally. All right, Mr. Dominic, well, where should people follow you throughout the week?
You can find me at blog.mdominic.com, or they can follow my annoying tweets on Twitter at Dumanuko.
Nice. Well, I think we have links to all of those good things in the show notes, as well as links to my good social profiles that only ever include incredibly enlightening posts. And
okay, Mr. Roboto.
Information that makes you a better person. That's why you'd want to follow me on those sites. All right, everyone. Well, don't forget, Coda Radio is released Monday afternoons over at JupiterBroadcasting.com. You can subscribe to the RSS feeds to get it automatically. If you're an iTunes user, we'd sure like a rate and comment. That way more people can find us. We need all of you out there because there's not too many of you. All right, everyone. Well, thanks so much for tuning in this week's episode of Coda Radio. We'll see you right back here next week.